in Congress and out of Congress. He doesn't have to answer for anything. Nothing. You have Chuck Todd referring to people as brown shirts. The list is really infinite. The list is infinite. The things that Trump supporters are called, the things that the president and his family are called, even the things that Democrats who don't toe the line are called. And now Rush Limbaugh comes under vicious attack. And one of the people who viciously attacks him is Jake Tapper over at CNN, but by no means alone, because they got the talking points from Media Matters. And he says, in so many words, I'm not even going to play it, because I don't want to hear his stinking voice. It's a long history, you see, of Rush Limbaugh being a bigot, as do all of you, you see, because we're racist from top to bottom. Long history. Sanders doesn't? No. Democrat Party doesn't? No. Rush Limbaugh. This is what they think about all of us. And the man doesn't have a bigoted bone in his body. And neither do I. Quite the contrary. Live and let live. Leave people alone. That's my attitude. That's not the attitude of the left, and it's certainly not the attitude of the press. And so the issue with Buttigieg, Rush points out, is an issue that Buttigieg in his own campaign has to struggle with. It's something this David Marcus points out in The Federalist. You see, folks, for a lot of Americans, men marrying men is just not acceptable. I'm not making a moral judgment. This is an analysis. For a lot of Americans, it is. A lot of it depends on geography. A lot of it depends on education. A lot of it depends on faith. But a lot of it is what it is. And when you're running for president, you have to take these things into consideration. And Buttigieg has. He has to decide the extent to which he wants to present his marriage to another man. The extent to which he wants to discuss it. The extent to which he wants to show the passion of it. Kissing. And this is Rush's point. Rush's point is, this will have political consequences. And it is legitimate to wonder what kind of political consequences they'll have. Even the Buttigieg campaign has to take that into consideration. Even the Democrat Party has to take that into consideration. Even Democrat voters take that into consideration. And if Buttigieg is going to make a public scene or presentation of kissing his husband, what are the consequences? What are the consequences? Now, when they move into South Carolina, will Pete Buttigieg be making a public display of his affection for his husband? Or not? Pete Buttigieg and his campaign and the Democrat Party, whether they admit it or not, whether they speak of it or not, certainly taking that into consideration. That's not homophobic. There's no moral judgment being made by Rush or me or anybody. It's not homophobic. That's a fact. It's a fact. As David Marcus points out, his own campaign have to ask these questions in deciding how he should approach being the first openly gay major presidential candidate. It's not a criticism. And none of this is really new, he says. We see articles and panel discussions from all over the political spectrum all the time about whether the country is ready to elect a woman president. In 2008, the question of whether Americans would elect a black man president was absolutely commonplace, as were specific discussions about how Obama should deal with that issue. And as with Obama being the first black nominee, if Buttigieg becomes the first openly gay nominee, that will come with advantages as well as disadvantages. For many voters, it will be viewed as a historic and fantastic step forward for the country. For others, like this woman in Iowa who wanted her vote back when she found out he was in a gay marriage, it could do harm. And this was the point that Rush Limbaugh was making, in the Rush Limbaugh way, points out Marcus. Sure, in a Democratic debate, smooching his husband on stage might play well with a lot of voters, but in a general election debate, it might not. But anyone who thinks Buttigieg's team, should he get there, won't be weighing the pros and cons of a post-debate kiss is more naive than Kay Adams Corleone and The Godfather. Of course they will, and likely in terms not dissimilar from Rush's. According to a Pew poll from last year, while 62% of white Americans support gay marriage, only 51% of blacks do. That gap in itself is meaningful. But when you consider whites are split about evenly between the two parties, while blacks are overwhelmingly Democrats, it becomes an even bigger concern. Certainly a bigger issue. Will Mayor Pete's campaign make careful and calculated choices about when and where he appears with his husband? You bet your sweet fanny they will, he writes. Not to do so would be political malpractice, and that ultimately is what Rush Limbaugh was talking about. He wasn't saying there shouldn't be a gay president. He was questioning whether America is ready for it and speculating as to how the Democrats might deal with the issue. In the era of outrage porn, and this is what Media Matters does, and CNN is the cable equivalent of Media Matters. This is what Mediaite does, which was born by Dan Abrams of ABC News, a legal analyst there. And this is why he's all over there pushing, this PD show and all the rest of it. He's a hack. And so in the era of outrage porn, points out Marcus, where snippets are snipped to drag anyone who doesn't toe the line, be it progressive wokeism on the left or Trumpism on the right. We're all supposed to be very careful what we say. Limbaugh isn't. He never has been. Nothing he said was homophobic. He's a pundit. How Buttigieg's sexual orientation works in the minds of voters is absolutely fair game to discuss. We do it in regard to race and gender constantly. But I'll tell you where we don't do it, Mr. Marcus. When it comes to the growing anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party, which is profoundly apparent in the being of Bernie Sanders and his campaign. That's where Jake Tapper draws the line. That's where the media draw the line. Now we get to this National Review piece. I want to give them credit. I don't remember the author, and I don't need to really read it to you. It's something I've been thinking about as well. We talked about this actually the other day, didn't we, Mr. Producer? Bernie Sanders is a Marxist. It doesn't mean he's a Leninist per se, or a Trotskyite per se, or a Stalinist per se, or a Maoist per se, but he's a Marxist. This is his ideology. And so he has these really confounding, often conflicting models in his head, but they all involve the same pedigree. He's not a particularly bright man. He's a man who's filled up to his eyeballs in Marxist propaganda and platitudes. Then he tries to build programs around it. And then he repeats himself about America being racist from top to bottom. Homophobic from top to bottom, xenophobic from top to bottom, how capitalism is a killer, how American corporations are the enemy. It's Karl Marx. It's what it is in modern form. Now, none of the people who attack me when I say that know a damn thing about Marx. Maybe they read the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto was a long booklet. It's a little book. They haven't read Marx and Engels. They have no idea what they're talking about. They haven't read Hegel, who in my view was really the foundational thinker for Marx, who just took it to another level and applied it to material and economics. They haven't read Rousseau. They have no idea what they're talking about. I know what Bernie Sanders has read. He's a talking point, old-time red from Brooklyn. And now, what's going to happen, as we mentioned the other day, it's pointed out in National Review, now they're going to reinvent Bernie. They don't even want to call him a democratic socialist anymore. They want to take that word socialist away. Because even though it's not a big majority, a majority of Americans cringe at the word socialism. 53%. We're holding on by our fingernails, but they're still there. So I'm sure they'll go back to calling him progressive, liberal, left of center, whereas any conservative is a right-winger, reactionary, conspiracy theory, white supremacist. Because that's how it works. Now, Jake Tapper, you should be ashamed of yourself. And you should apologize to your audience of 7 about what you said the other night and your attempt to exploit what Rush said as a mouthpiece for Media Matters. And then you went further, because you're not really a journalist. You're a poser. You're a poser. You said you lost track of how many marriages he had. Why did you say that? Why did you say that? Did Rush criticize Buttigieg's marriage? Not in the least. He didn't attack his marriage at all. So why did you attack Rush? Because you're vile, that's why. Because you're a leftist, that's why. Because you and Todd and Stephanopoulos and the others, you always in the end show your true colors and go back true to form, don't you? You can't help it. It becomes knee-jerk almost. Since you want to know, he's had 4 marriages. But let me tell you what he hasn't done. He hasn't done what your hero John Kennedy did, which is slept with thousands of women while he was married. Or Lyndon Johnson, which has slept with thousands of women when he was married. Or molested interns, which 2 of your great presidents did. He's been faithful to each and every wife. Nobody goes into a marriage expecting it to fall apart. But no public figure tries to make a logical and rational point about an issue that is in front of the American people, that the campaign itself is dealing with, that Americans are thinking about. Not in a bigoted way, but trying to make an analysis of what's taking place, and should have to expect a so-called newsroom, a news broadcaster like you, to do what you did. And you're not alone. You guys pile on. You gang slander. You gang libel. That's what you do. You're all too stupid to think for yourselves. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.